Don't kill my fish! Please turn it off, they're dying!
Oh, relax, hero. It's under control.
I landed a 4-pound bass at dawn, and 30 seconds later, my phone told me the HOA wanted to kill every fish in Rainbow Lake. The bass fought like it knew something I didn't. Took me 6 minutes to bring it in, rod bent double, line singing that high note that means you're either about to land a trophy or lose your favorite lure. The water was glass smooth, reflecting the caldera walls like a postcard nobody believes is real until they've seen it. Spring-fed clarity. You could see 20 feet down to where the volcanic rock formations created those perfect hiding spots for big bass with territorial attitudes. I've caught fish on 4 continents, mapped aquifers under 3 oceans, and spent 30 years explaining to people who think they're smarter than geology exactly why they're wrong. This bass, though, this was the reason I'd bought the cabin. The reason I'd paid those inflated HOA fees without complaint. The reason I'd turned down consulting contracts in Houston to retire early in Lakewood Heights. I released the bass and watched it disappear into the volcanic structure I'd studied 15 years ago for Chevron. Back then, they'd wanted to know if drilling was viable in collapsed calderas. Turns out this one was Swiss cheese underneath, collapsed chambers, fractured limestone, direct channels between surface water and the aquifer feeding every well in what would become our little luxury community. I'd told Chevron no. Too unstable, too much risk of contamination events. My phone buzzed again. Emergency meeting tonight, modernizing Lakewood Heights community standards. From Cynthia Marlowe, HOA president. I muttered something to the bass's vacant spot in the water. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. The community center smelled like new carpet and old grudges. I sat in the back row next to Ted Hoskins, who'd retired from the fire department with the kind of instincts that keep you alive in burning buildings. He took one look at Cynthia's PowerPoint setup and whispered, "We're fucked." "Not yet," I said. "Give her 10 minutes. Took 8. Cynthia Marlowe had the posture of someone who'd attended executive presence training and the smile of someone who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. Former marketing VP, transplant from Los Angeles, drove a Tesla with a bumper sticker that said, "Kindness is everything," right above the lawyer's business card tucked in her visor. I'd checked, public record. She'd threatened to sue 3 neighbors in her first 6 months over fence height violations. Her PowerPoint was titled Vision 2025, Luxury Living Standards. She clicked through slides showing Zillow comparisons. Communities without fishing, average property value $1.2 million. Communities with fishing, average property value $890K. The math was garbage, different states, different markets, cherry-picked data points, but it looked official enough for the crowd. Our Rainbow Lake, Cynthia said, making eye contact with everyone except me, represents our community's crown jewel. But current usage patterns, specifically fishing, create an archaic blood sport atmosphere incompatible with the luxury living experience our property values should reflect. Ted shifted beside me. Blood sport, it's catch and release. I'd spent 45 minutes that afternoon running numbers. The caldera formation meant any chemical introduction to the lake would reach residential wells in 72 to 96 hours, maybe faster if they used the wrong dispersal pattern. The fractured limestone underneath acted like a highway system directly into the aquifer. I'd mapped it. I had the data. I'd published a paper on it that 3 petroleum companies had paid me to write. I stood up, no hand-raising, no preamble. That lake connects to our water table. You screw with it, you screw with our wells. I've got the geological surveys from 2009. Cynthia's smile didn't waver. She'd been trained for interruptions. We've consulted with professionals, Mr. Calhoun, not conspiracy theorists. The board members laughed. Nervous laughter, the kind that sounds like agreement but means they're trying to figure out which side wins. I sat down, Ted leaned over. Professionals, that's what they call the guys who designed the Titanic. Those guys actually understood engineering, I said. The vote was scheduled for next month. Cynthia needed time to gather community input and finalize vendor proposals. Translation, time to make sure she had the votes locked down before anyone asked difficult questions. I went home and opened my office safe. The geological surveys were pristine, preserved in archival plastic, because I'd known they might matter someday, just hadn't known it would be for this. The caldera formation spread across my desk in full color, three-dimensional rendering showing the collapsed volcanic chambers below Rainbow Lake, aquifer channels marked in blue, well locations marked in red. The overlay looked like a child's circulatory system diagram, every vein leading back to the heart. I'd done this analysis for free, actually, after buying the cabin, wanted to know my water source, where it came from, how protected it was. Turns out it wasn't protected at all. One contamination event in the lake, and every well in Lakewood Heights was compromised within 4 days. I pulled up the HOA bylaws. Cynthia was using Section 7.3, Aesthetic Improvements and Community Beautification. Anything classified as aesthetic didn't require environmental impact studies as long as the contractor was licensed and insured. My bourbon was 15 years old, seemed appropriate. The vendor proposal appeared in the public records the next morning. Aquapure Inc., two-phase chemical treatment, eliminate existing fish population, introduce decorative koi. Cost, $85,000 from HOA reserve funds. I read the chemical specifications 3 times. Organophosphates, persistent, neurotoxic, EPA approved for fish elimination in controlled circumstances with proper geological assessment and containment protocols. None of which Aquapure had conducted here. I did the math on chemical dispersal. Lake volume, 47 million gallons. Proposed chemical load, 200 gallons at industrial concentration. Fractured limestone channels, estimated 40% direct aquifer connection. Time to well contamination, 70 to 96 hours. Then I did something I'd regret for the rest of my life. I sent one email, subject line, "You're about to poison 127 families." I attached every geological survey, every aquifer map, every chemical dispersal calculation, 47 pages of documentation that proved exactly what would happen if she went through with this. Then I poured another bourbon and waited. Cynthia responded in 4 hours. "Thank you for your concerns. Our licensed professionals have assured us the treatment is completely safe. Please refrain from spreading unfounded panic." I read that email 6 times. Licensed professionals. She'd capitalized it like a religious title. Ted called that evening. You see her response. "Yeah. What are you gonna do?" I looked at my desk. The geological surveys, the chemical data, the contamination timeline predictions, everything a person would need to understand they were about to poison themselves. "I did my civic duty," I said. "Sent her everything, conscience clear." Ted was quiet for a moment. "Ray, if you're right." "I am right." "Then people need to know." I told the person in charge. She called me a conspiracy theorist. That's as far as my obligation goes. I hung up and opened my laptop, created a new spreadsheet, titled it "I Told You So, XLSX." Tomorrow I'd request 45 minutes at the special meeting. I'd present everything properly. Charts, maps, calculations, make it so clear that even Cynthia's perfect posture couldn't dismiss it. And if she did, anyway? Well, sometimes the only way people learn is by touching the stove. I just had to decide whether I was obligated to keep grabbing their hand away. The special meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7. I arrived at 6:30 with my laptop, projector, and a folder thick enough to kill someone if I threw it hard enough. Carol Fitzsimmons helped me set up the screen. She was the only board member who'd actually read my email attachment. I could tell because she'd asked me 3 specific questions about aquifer channel depth that nobody asks unless they've looked at the data. "How bad is it really?" she whispered while I connected the HDMI cable. "Worst case, uninhabitable community within a year. Best case, 15 families with permanent kidney damage." She went pale, and Cynthia knows this. I sent her everything, 47 pages. She responded with 2 sentences. Carol looked at the board table where Cynthia was arranging name placards with the precision of someone who'd learned authority from arranging boardroom seats. She's not going to listen to you. I know, but I want it documented that she had the chance. By 7, the room was packed, every seat filled, people standing against walls. I recognized most faces, the Petersons, the Hoskins family, Ron and Margaret from 3 doors down, James Wu who always wore bow ties, even to HOA meetings. These were my neighbors, people I'd waved to for 5 years, people who trusted their HOA president to make decisions that wouldn't kill them. Cynthia called the meeting to order with a smile that could have sold timeshares. Thank you all for coming. We've set aside 45 minutes for Mr. Calhoun to present his concerns about our lake beautification project. Ray, the floor is yours. I clicked to the first slide. USGS Geological Survey 2009, Rainbow Lake and surrounding caldera formation. This is what's under your houses, I said. Collapsed volcanic caldera. The lake sits in what used to be a magma chamber about 12,000 years ago. When it collapsed, it created a fractured limestone structure that looks like Swiss cheese if you map it properly. I showed them the 3D rendering. Blue channels snaking through gray rock formations, all converging toward the red dots marking well locations. Every one of those blue lines is a direct path from the lake to your drinking water. No filtration, no barriers, no protection. Water from the lake reaches your wells in 72 to 96 hours. Ted Hoskins leaned forward. I saw his face doing the math. Next slide, chemical composition analysis of Aquapure's proposed treatment. This is what they want to put in the lake. Organophosphate compounds at industrial concentration, neurotoxic, persistent in water systems, EPA approved for fishery management in geologically stable formations with proper containment. I let that hang for 5 seconds. We don't have a geologically stable formation. We have a fractured volcanic caldera with direct aquifer connection. This isn't a contained system. This is your drinking water. Slide 3, dispersal timeline. Color-coded contamination zones spreading through the aquifer channel system. Day 1, chemicals deploy in lake. Day 2, compounds enter aquifer through fractured channels. Day 3, contamination reaches peripheral wells. Day 4, entire well system compromised. Day 5, you're drinking neurotoxins. I watched Cynthia during all of this. She'd pulled out her phone after slide 2. Now she was texting, thumb moving across the screen with the focus of someone who'd mastered the art of looking busy while ignoring everything around her. I mapped this formation 15 years ago for Chevron, I continued. They wanted to know if drilling was viable here. I told them no, too much risk of contamination events. They listened because getting it wrong would have cost them $40 million in cleanup liability. James Wu raised his hand. He was a retired dentist, careful with questions, precise with words. Mr. Calhoun, what's your confidence level in this analysis? If I was wrong about this formation, Chevron would have sued me for malpractice and won. I wasn't wrong. The data's been peer-reviewed and published. I brought copies for anyone who wants them. Margaret Peterson spoke up from the 3rd row, but the company doing the treatment, they must know about this. That's what we're about to find out. Cynthia cut me off at 44 minutes, perfect smile still in place. Thank you for your passionate opinions, Mr. Calhoun, very thorough. Now I'd like to introduce Derek Vance from Aquapure Inc., who can address these concerns with actual professional expertise. Derek Vance looked like he'd stepped out of a yacht club brochure. Mid-40s, spray tan, suit that cost more than my truck, teeth too white to be real. He set up his own laptop with the efficiency of someone who'd done this presentation 100 times. His slideshow opened with tropical fish swimming in crystal clear water. Aquapure Inc. has been beautifying community water features for 15 years across 17 states. We specialize in transforming outdated recreational lakes into stunning visual amenities that increase property values and community pride. Before and after photos, Florida communities, Arizona developments, each one showing murky fishing lakes transformed into pristine reflection pools with decorative koi. Our proprietary two-phase treatment process uses EPA-approved compounds that are completely safe when applied by licensed professionals following established protocols. He smiled at the crowd like a dentist about to tell you the cavity won't hurt. We've completed over 300 projects without a single contamination incident. I stood up, didn't raise my hand. What's the aquifer structure at your Florida sites? Derek's smile held. That's proprietary client information, Mr. Calhoun, and it's not proprietary. It's public geological data available from USGS. You don't know, do you? Cynthia stood. Mr. Calhoun, you've had your time. Derek is a licensed professional with 15 years of marketing fish-killing chemicals, I said. I have 30 years mapping underground fluid dynamics for petroleum companies who fire people for getting it wrong. The room went quiet, that specific kind of quiet that happens when strangers watch two people who hate each other stay polite. James Wu raised his hand again, always following protocol even when nobody else was. Mr. Vance, have you assessed our specific aquifer structure? Derek's smile never wavered. Our process is universally applicable to all freshwater systems. We follow EPA guidelines that ensure. So you haven't, James said. We've reviewed all available public information and determined that Rainbow Lake is an excellent candidate for our beautification process. I muttered it loud enough that the front 2 rows heard me. So is poison. Ted actually laughed, one bark of sound he tried to cover with a cough. Cynthia called for the vote. I watched hands go up. Carol Fitzsimmons voted no. James Wu voted no. Ted Hoskins wasn't on the board, but stood up anyway like he wanted to vote no with his whole body. 6 voted yes. Cynthia, Derek sitting there like his vote counted, and 4 board members who owned properties on the far side of the development, furthest from the lake. Their wells would be the last contaminated. Motion carries, Cynthia announced. Treatment scheduled for next Wednesday at 6 a.m. Meeting adjourned. People filed out, some looked worried, most looked confused. Margaret Peterson stopped at my chair. You really think our water will be poisoned? I looked at her, 73 years old, retired teacher, moved here because the lake was beautiful and the community seemed safe. Yes, I said, I know it will be. What should we do? I could have said it then, could have told everyone in that room to switch to bottled water starting Wednesday, could have stood up and made them listen. Instead, I said, that's between you and the HOA board you elected. That night, sitting on my deck with Ted, I sent 6 text messages. Same message, different recipients, people I'd fished with, people I'd shared bourbon with, people who'd actually listened when I talked about geology. Switch to bottled water starting Wednesday. Don't tell anyone I told you. Don't ask why. Ted read his message twice. This is what we are doing. Secret warnings to friends while everyone else drinks poison. I stood up in that meeting. I presented 45 minutes of data. They voted anyway. I've done my civic duty. Your civic duty, Ted repeated. He drank his beer and stared at the lake. Ray, if people die, then they die because Cynthia Marlowe has a marketing degree and thinks it's the same as a geology PhD. He left without finishing his beer, first time that had ever happened. I went inside and set up my testing equipment. Commercial-grade water analysis kit, same one I'd used for Chevron. $3,000 of chemistry equipment arranged on my garage workbench. Created a new folder on my laptop, Rainbow Lake Contamination Evidence. Labeled my first spreadsheet, I told you so, XLSX. Wednesday was 5 days away. After that, I'd know exactly how long it took for arrogance to become poisoning. Wednesday arrived with perfect weather. 72 degrees, no wind, sky so blue it hurt to look at. The kind of morning that makes people buy mountain property and convince themselves they've found paradise. I was on my deck at 5:30 with binoculars, camera, and a thermos of coffee I'd made with bottled water. Old habit from petroleum sites: document everything, trust nothing, assume everyone's lying until the data proves otherwise. The Aquapure boats arrived at 5:55. 2 vessels, industrial grade, the kind with reinforced hulls and equipment mounts that meant serious business. 4 workers in hazmat suits, full coverage, respirators, gloves, boots sealed to the suits. The kind of gear you wear when the substance you're handling can kill you if you're not careful. I zoomed in with my camera, started taking photos, time-stamped, GPS-tagged, high resolution. The workers were unloading tanks marked with hazard symbols I recognized from my petroleum days. Skull and crossbones, environmental hazard, aquatic toxicity warning. They were dressed for Chernobyl while telling the community it was safe for our water supply. Even marketing has its limits. The first tank opened at 6:03. I filmed the entire deployment, milky white liquid spreading across Rainbow Lake's surface like spilled paint. The workers used spray equipment, creating a fine mist that settled over the water in clouds. Methodical pattern, working from north to south, covering every square foot. The lake turned opaque within 20 minutes. Couldn't see 6 inches down. The spring-fed clarity that had taken 12,000 years to create, gone in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom. Other residents were watching too. I could see them on their decks, some taking photos of the boats, the morning mist, the aesthetic transformation of their community water feature. Cynthia posted on the community Facebook page at 6:30, "Beautification in progress, water sparkles," with a photo of the milky water looking almost artistic in the dawn light. Nobody was wearing hazmat suits except the workers. I climbed down to the lake's edge when the boats left, filled a sample bottle from the surface water. The liquid was viscous, chemical smell strong enough to make my eyes water. I labeled it Day 0, lake surface 700 hours, and locked it in my garage. My garage had become something else over the past 5 days. I'd converted half of it into a testing station. Commercial water analysis equipment lined the workbench: spectrophotometer, pH meters, chemical reagent kits, sample storage with temperature control. $3,000 of chemistry equipment I'd bought with consulting money from a job I'd turned down in Houston. The job had been good. 6 months, $500,000, mapping aquifer systems for a fracking operation. I'd said no because I'd retired to fish and watch bass spawn in volcanic clarity. Now I was using that equipment money to document how marketing degrees poison communities. I tested the lake sample immediately. Organophosphate levels 400 times normal background levels. Neurotoxic concentration that would kill a bass in under 3 minutes. Kill a human depends on exposure, duration, body mass, but kidney damage was guaranteed at these levels. Liver damage probable, neurological damage possible. I updated my spreadsheet. Day 0, lake contamination confirmed. Then I tested my well water. Crystal clear, no chemical signature, exactly as expected. The timeline I'd calculated gave 72 to 96 hours for aquifer infiltration. This was hour 1. Thursday morning, well water still clear. Friday morning, well water still clear. Saturday morning, I detected the first trace compounds at 6 a.m. Organophosphate markers at 0.03 parts per million. Background level was 0. The chemicals had reached the aquifer and were beginning dispersal through the fractured channels. I circled the data point in red marker, drew an arrow to my timeline prediction. Contamination begins 72 hours post-deployment. I'd been off by 3 hours. My doorbell rang at 2 that afternoon. Carol Fitzsimmons stood on my porch looking like she hadn't slept. "My grandkids are visiting next week, all 3 of them. Is the water safe?" I could have lied, could have said I didn't know, could have suggested she call the county health department and wait for their testing schedule. "No," I said. Her face did something complicated. "What do I do?" "Bottled water, everything, drinking, cooking, brushing teeth. Don't tell anyone I told you." "Why not warn everyone?" I pulled out my phone, played her the recording from the vote, her own hand going up, her own voice saying, "I vote yes for the lake treatment proposal." She listened to herself for 15 seconds, then left without another word. Sunday I tested again. Organophosphate levels 0.12 parts per million. Rising. EPA safe limit for drinking water 0.008 parts per million. We were already 15 times over. I took samples from my kitchen tap, my bathroom, my outdoor spigot, all identical. The aquifer was compromised throughout the entire system. Every well in Lakewood Heights was pulling from the same poison source. I could have called the county health department, could have emailed all 127 homeowners, could have driven door to door showing them my test results. Instead, I updated my spreadsheet, took more samples, added more data points to my growing evidence folder. I was either the most ethical person here or the worst, probably both. Monday morning, I heard the sirens at 8:15. Ambulance at the Peterson house, 3 doors down. I watched from my kitchen window while drinking coffee made with bottled water. Margaret Peterson carried out on a stretcher, Ron beside her looking confused and terrified in that specific way that means he knows something's wrong but doesn't know what. Neighbors gathering on the street. Speculation traveling in whispers. Heart attack, maybe, stroke. She's 73, these things happen. I'd tested the Peterson well Sunday night, snuck over at 2 a.m. with my equipment while Ron was asleep. Their outdoor spigot was unlocked. I took 3 samples. Organophosphate levels, 15 times EPA limits. Margaret had probably been drinking that water for 4 days, cooking with it, making coffee, brushing her teeth. Her kidneys had been processing industrial neurotoxins while she watered her garden and wondered why she felt tired. By Monday afternoon, 3 more hospitalizations. The Ramirez family 2 houses down, Bill Kowalski across the street, Jennifer Chen from the corner lot. By Tuesday, 11 people in the hospital. Cynthia sent a community email Tuesday evening, "Please remain calm. The county health department is investigating a possible virus or food contamination event. There is no evidence linking these illnesses to our recent lake beautification project. Continue normal water usage and report any symptoms to your doctor." I read that email 3 times. Continue normal water usage. She was telling people to keep drinking poison. My phone rang at 7 p.m. County investigator Rachel Morrison, professional voice, cop trained to sound neutral. "Mr. Calhoun, we understand you raised concerns about the lake treatment prior to deployment. We need to speak with you about your predictions and any documentation you may have." "I have everything," I said. "When do you want it?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring all correspondence, all technical data, all test results." I spent Tuesday night printing documents, every warning email I'd sent Cynthia, every geological survey, every aquifer map, every chemical analysis, every water test from the past 6 days, including my own well water tests. Saturday through Monday, 4 days of documented contamination, 4 days where I knew the water was poisoned and watched my neighbors drink it anyway. The data didn't lie. I detected contamination 72 hours before Margaret Peterson collapsed. I'd known for 96 hours before 11 people were hospitalized. I could have stopped this, not through official channels. Cynthia had proven those were useless, but I could have gone to the media, could have contacted every homeowner with certified letters, could have stood on my lawn with a megaphone at 6 a.m. every morning reading test results until someone listened. Instead, I documented my warnings, covered my legal exposure, and let arrogance run its course. I labeled my evidence folder, Exhibit A, How to be legally right and morally wrong. Then I poured a bourbon and watched the lake through my window. Crystal clear now in the moonlight, no fish rising, no life at all, just poison reflecting the stars like it was something beautiful. Tomorrow I'd hand over everything to the county. Tomorrow they'd know exactly what happened and exactly when I knew it was happening. Tonight, I was just a man who'd chosen documentation over prevention. I finished the bourbon and went to pack for the morning meeting. Some choices you make, some choices make you. I still didn't know which category this one fell into. The community center had never been this full. Every seat occupied, people standing 3 deep against the walls, overflow crowd outside watching through windows. The local news had sent a van. County health officials sat at a table up front with the kind of folders that meant lawyers had already been consulted. I arrived at 8:50 with my evidence in a wheeled suitcase, 47 pounds of documentation. Ted helped me carry it up the steps while people stared like I was bringing a corpse to a funeral. Cynthia sat at the board table wearing a navy suit that probably cost $3,000. Her posture was perfect. Her expression was concerned but confident, the look executives practice for crisis management seminars. 4 other board members flanked her. Carol Fitzsimmons had resigned yesterday. Her letter cited irreconcilable differences regarding community health and safety. Dr. Sarah Chen from County Health opened the meeting at 9 sharp. Mid-50s, Korean-American, the kind of competence that comes from 20 years of telling people things they don't want to hear. "We've completed preliminary water testing across Lakewood Heights," she said. "No preamble, no soft lead-in. Your lake water contains organophosphate compounds at levels 50 times the EPA drinking water safety limit. Your aquifer is contaminated. All 127 residential wells are currently unsafe for any human consumption." The room erupted. Shouting, crying, Margaret Peterson's daughter standing up and screaming at Cynthia with the kind of rage that comes from watching your mother's kidneys fail. Ted had to physically restrain her from climbing over the table. Cynthia's expression shifted to practiced sympathy. "We are cooperating fully with all investigators." Aquapure assured us their process was completely. Dr. Chen cut her off. "Your contractor used industrial-grade pesticides without conducting geological assessment of the aquifer system. They deployed compounds designed for contained water features with impermeable beds. You have a fractured volcanic caldera with direct surface-to-groundwater connection. This was preventable." "We hired licensed professionals," Cynthia said. Her voice had that edge now, the corporate defensiveness that sounds like authority but means panic. "We followed all proper protocols for." "You were warned." Dr. Chen opened her folder. "We have documentation of explicit warnings from a certified environmental consultant prior to treatment deployment. Multiple warnings, detailed geological data, chemical dispersal predictions, all ignored." She looked at me. Everyone looked at me. "Mr. Calhoun, you predicted this contamination event." I stood up, felt every eye in the room tracking me to the front, set my suitcase on the evidence table, and opened it. "I didn't predict it," I said. "I calculated it. There's a difference." First document, geological surveys from 2009. I laid them across the table so everyone in the front row could see. Rainbow Lake sits in a collapsed volcanic caldera. The subsurface structure is fractured limestone with direct aquifer channels. I mapped this formation for Chevron 15 years ago. This is peer-reviewed, published data. Second document, my initial warning email to Cynthia, time-stamped, certified delivery receipt attached. I sent this on the day she announced the treatment proposal. 47 pages of geological data, chemical analysis, and contamination timeline predictions. She responded, I pulled out her email, with 2 sentences calling my concerns unfounded panic. Third document, recording transcript from the special meeting. I presented for 45 minutes, aquifer maps, dispersal models, contamination timeline. Mrs. Marlowe checked her phone the entire time. Someone in the crowd had their phone out. They played the video. You could see Cynthia's face, thumbs scrolling, eyes on the screen, while I explained exactly how she was about to poison everyone. The room got quiet. Fourth document, my chemical dispersal calculations. I predicted contamination would reach residential wells in 72 to 96 hours. Here's the actual timeline. I showed Dr. Chen my well water tests. 72 hours, 3 minutes. I was off by 3 minutes. Dr. Chen examined my data. You tested your own well water starting when? Day 0, every 12 hours, documented the entire contamination progression. And you detected compounds on day 3. Saturday morning, 0.03 parts per million, first trace evidence. She looked at her own timeline. First hospitalization was Monday morning. Correct. That's 72 hours after you detected contamination. Correct. The silence in the room changed quality. People were doing math. Ted's face had gone carefully neutral, the expression he used when he was trying not to react to something that made him angry. Cynthia stood up, her perfect posture cracking just slightly. He's an expert. He knew this would happen. Why didn't he warn everyone? I pulled out the last documents, my own well water tests, day by day, Saturday through Monday, every sample time-stamped, every result documented, every piece of evidence showing I'd known for 72 hours before Margaret Peterson collapsed. I did warn everyone, I said. I warned you multiple times. You called me a conspiracy theorist. I played the recording. Cynthia's voice. We've consulted with professionals, Mr. Calhoun, not conspiracy theorists. You ignored every warning. You proceeded anyway. So I documented everything, switched to bottled water, and watched you poison yourselves. You could have stopped this. Her voice was shrill now, executive presence training abandoned. You could have warned people directly. I warned the person in charge. That was you. What you did with that information was your responsibility. Dr. Chen held up her hand. Mr. Calhoun, did you warn anyone else, any individual residents? This was the moment. I could lie, could say no, could maintain the moral high ground of having done my official duty and nothing more. Instead, I pulled out my phone records. I sent 6 text messages on Tuesday night. Friends, people I fish with, told them to switch to bottled water starting Wednesday. The room exploded again. Someone shouted, "You saved your friends and let the rest of us drink poison." Margaret's daughter was crying now, horrible gasping sobs. Ted wouldn't look at me. I warned the HOA board officially, I said. That's my legal obligation. What I did beyond that was personal choice. James Wu stood up in the back, still wearing a bow tie even to this disaster. But you had information that could have saved lives. You had a moral obligation. I had a professional obligation to warn the authority in charge. I fulfilled it. Cynthia dismissed it. At that point, it became her responsibility to act. I pulled out more documents, but let's talk about responsibility. Mrs. Marlowe, can you explain your relationship with Market Vision Holdings? Cynthia went pale, actually pale, color draining from her face in real time. That's irrelevant. Aquapure Inc. is a subsidiary of Market Vision Holdings. You worked for Market Vision subsidiary companies for 8 years. You still own 50,000 shares of Market Vision stock. I laid out the SEC filings. Your stock value increases when Aquapure expands their client contracts. You had a financial incentive to approve this treatment. Dr. Chen took the documents. Her expression didn't change, but her hands moved faster, flipping through pages. That's a coincidence, Cynthia said. I left that company 8 years ago, but you kept the stock options. They vest on a performance schedule. Aquapure's Q3 earnings determine your payout. This treatment was worth approximately $42,000 to you personally if it led to expanded contracts in mountain communities. The county investigator leaned forward. Mrs. Marlowe will need to examine all your financial records. I want my lawyer. That's your right. The room fractured after that. Some people yelling at Cynthia, some yelling at me, some just sitting there stunned, trying to process that their water was poisoned, their community was contaminated, and the 2 people who could have prevented it were both responsible in different ways. Margaret's daughter pushed through the crowd, got right in my face. My mother is dying, kidney failure. She's 73 years old and her kidneys are shutting down because you knew the water was poison and you let her drink it. I met her eyes, didn't look away. I'm sorry about your mother. I warned the HOA board. They voted to proceed anyway. You could have warned her directly. Yes, I could have. Then why didn't you? Because I documented my official warnings, covered my legal exposure, and decided that wasn't my responsibility. She slapped me hard enough that my jaw cracked, hard enough that the room went silent. I didn't touch my face, didn't react. You're right, I said. That doesn't make you feel better, but you're right. She left, half the room followed her. Dr. Chen closed her folder. Mr. Calhoun, we'll need all your documentation for the investigation. You'll be subpoenaed as an expert witness. I brought everything, it's all here. Including evidence of your own knowledge timeline. Including everything. The meeting dissolved. County officials took my evidence. News crews tried to interview me. I walked past all of them. Ted caught up with me in the parking lot. Ray. I stopped. Was it worth it, being right? No. Then why? Because Cynthia needed to learn that expertise isn't whatever supports her opinion. And sometimes the only teacher is consequence. Margaret Peterson is dying. I know. Could you have saved her? I looked at him, 20 years of friendship, fishing trips and bourbon and conversations about everything except the things that actually mattered. Yes, I said, I could have saved her. Ted nodded, walked away. I sat in my truck and watched the crowd disperse, watched Cynthia leave in her Tesla with her lawyer, watched the news van pack up, watched my neighbors, former neighbors, drive away to temporary housing because their homes were uninhabitable. My phone buzzed, email from the county prosecutor. Subject, Cynthia Marlowe plea deal, testimony required. She wanted reduced charges, no jail time, probation and fines if she testified against Aquapure's executives. They needed my testimony to reject the deal. I typed one sentence, I'll testify, no deal. Then I drove home to start packing. 6 weeks later, I was living in my house, but not really living in it. Everything packed in boxes. Furniture staged for photos. Real estate agent kept calling with the same update. No offers, no showings, no interest in purchasing property in a federally designated contamination zone. The living room had become a war room. Deposition transcripts stacked on the coffee table. Legal documents covering every surface. 3 different lawsuits, 4 criminal investigations, 2 federal agencies, and 1 class action complaint that listed me on page 47 as expert witness who provided unheeded warnings. My lawyer said I was legally bulletproof. I'd fulfilled my professional obligation by warning the HOA board directly. Everything after that was personal choice, and personal choice wasn't actionable unless I'd had a specific duty to warn, which I didn't. Morally, that was a different calculation. The morning's deposition transcript sat open on my laptop. Cynthia's testimony from yesterday, 200 pages of her explaining how she'd relied on licensed professionals, how she'd acted in good faith, how she couldn't have known the treatment would cause contamination. My lawyer had highlighted the relevant sections in yellow. Every time Cynthia claimed ignorance, there was a corresponding document proving I'd warned her. Every time she said unforeseen consequences, there was my email predicting exactly those consequences. Page 94. I received some concerns from Mr. Calhoun, but they seemed exaggerated and alarmist. Page 112. I consulted with our contractor who assured me Mr. Calhoun's fears were unfounded. Page 163. I had no way of knowing the lake connected to our water supply. That last one made me laugh. Bitter sound, no humor in it. She'd lived here for 18 months and never wondered where her drinking water came from. The criminal charges were substantial. Reckless endangerment for Cynthia, fraud and environmental crimes for Derek Vance and Aquapure Inc. The prosecutor was building a case that would probably put Derek away for 5 to 7 years. Cynthia might get probation if she cooperated. Unless I testified. My testimony would prove she'd been explicitly warned by a certified expert, would show she'd proceeded despite detailed geological data proving contamination was inevitable, would demonstrate her financial conflict of interest with Market Vision Holdings. With my testimony, Cynthia was looking at 3 years minimum. The civil lawsuit was worse. 41 families suing for medical damages, property value loss, relocation costs, emotional distress. Current estimate, $30 million. The HOA's insurance had denied coverage because Cynthia had been warned by a qualified expert and proceeded anyway. That denial meant personal liability for the board members. Cynthia's house was already in foreclosure. I walked through Lakewood Heights that afternoon, needed to see it one more time before I left for good. The community looked like a neutron bomb had gone off, structures intact, life absent. For sale signs on every third house, most had been up for months. Prices had cratered from an average of $900,000 to $175,000. Even at that price, nobody was buying. The EPA designation meant mandatory disclosure. Property located in contaminated zone. Aquifer recovery time, 15 to 20 years. Rainbow Lake was crystal clear. I stood at the shore where I'd caught that bass on the last normal morning. The water was so transparent I could see 30 feet down to the volcanic rock formations. No fish, no insects, no algae, just sterile clarity reflecting the sky like a mirror. Beautiful and dead. Ted's house had a for sale sign. I knocked anyway. He answered in shorts and a faded fire department t-shirt, holding a beer even though it was 2 in the afternoon. Raise. Moving. Phoenix, got a place near my daughter, can't stay here. I understand. Do you? He took a long drink, because I'm not sure you understand anything except being right. I deserved that, probably true. Margaret Peterson died yesterday, kidney failure. Ron's moving to Oregon to live with his son. He'll never see this place again. I know, I sent flowers. Flowers, Jesus Christ, Ray. Ted set his beer down hard enough that foam spilled over. You could have saved her. You could have knocked on every door and told everyone to stop drinking the water. Instead, you sent 6 text messages to your fishing buddies and watched everyone else get poisoned. I warned the HOA board. Stop saying that. I know what you did legally. I'm asking about what you did as a human being, as a neighbor, as someone who knew people were going to die and had the power to stop it. I looked at him, 20 years of friendship evaporating in real time. You want me to say I was wrong. I want you to say you feel something about Margaret dying. I feel a lot of things about Margaret dying. None of them changed the fact that I warned the people in charge and they ignored me. Ted shook his head. You know what the worst part is? You're going to walk away from this legally clean, expert witness. Did your duty, covered your ass. Meanwhile, 41 families are sick, Margaret's dead, and this community is finished. But Ray Calhoun gets to drive away knowing he was right the whole time. Being right doesn't mean I'm happy about it. Are you sure? Because from where I'm standing, you've been documenting your vindication for 6 weeks. All those water tests, all those recordings, all that evidence. You built a perfect case proving you were right and Cynthia was wrong. Tell me you didn't enjoy that at least a little. I didn't answer. Ted picked up his beer. Yeah, that's what I thought. Have a good life, Ray. Hope being right keeps you warm. He closed the door. I walked back to my house past the Peterson place. Ron had already moved out. The house sat empty, Margaret's garden dying from lack of water. She'd planted tomatoes this spring, back when she thought she had a future here. Carol Fitzsimmons pulled up as I reached my driveway. She'd aged 10 years in 6 weeks, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there at the last meeting. My granddaughter asked me something yesterday, she said without preamble. Asked why the water made her sick, if the grown-ups knew it was poison. I didn't know what to tell her. What did you say? I said sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but that's not really true, is it? We didn't make mistakes. You knew exactly what would happen. Cynthia knew you knew, I knew you knew. We all just decided it wasn't our problem until it was too late. She handed me an envelope. You're being sued. 3 homeowners claim you had expert knowledge and negligently failed to warn despite having the means and opportunity to prevent harm. I took the envelope. My lawyer says they can't win. They probably can't, but they're going to try, because their kids are sick and they need someone to blame besides themselves for voting yes. I voted no. You also stayed silent while people drank poison, legally distinct, morally complicated. She started back to her car, then stopped. I voted yes because I trusted Cynthia. She was the president. She said she'd consulted professionals. I didn't know enough to question it. But you knew everything. You could have made us listen. How? I presented for 45 minutes. You could have gone to the media, could have called the county health department before treatment instead of after, could have done literally anything except document your warnings and watch us poison ourselves. She drove away. That night, I opened the lawsuit. 3 plaintiffs, the Ramirez family, Bill Kowalski, Jennifer Chen. Their kids were in the hospital with kidney damage, medical bills already exceeding $200,000 per family. The claim was negligence. They argued I had superior knowledge, recognized imminent harm, had the ability to prevent it, and chose not to act beyond minimal professional obligation. My lawyer was right. They probably couldn't win. Professional duty doesn't extend to individual warnings when you've warned the governing authority. I'd done everything legally required. But reading their complaint, reading about 9-year-old Sophia Ramirez's dialysis schedule, about 12-year-old Kevin Kowalski's liver enzyme counts, about 7-year-old Emma Chen's neurological symptoms, I realized legal and moral had diverged somewhere around the time I sent those 6 text messages. I'd chosen my friends over my neighbors. I'd chosen documentation over prevention. I'd chosen being right over being good. My phone rang. Prosecutor Morrison. Cynthia's accepting the plea deal. 3 years probation, 200 hours community service, $10,000 fine. She testifies against Aquapure executives. The deal goes through. We need your testimony to reject it. What happens if you reject the deal? Trial, she's looking at 3 years minimum, possibly 5. But trials are uncertain. Juries are unpredictable. The plea deal is guaranteed consequences. And if I don't testify? Then we probably have to take the deal. Your documentation proves she was warned, but your testimony makes it irrefutable. Without you, her lawyer argues she consulted multiple professionals who contradicted you, made a good faith decision based on conflicting expert opinions. I thought about Margaret Peterson, about Sophia Ramirez on dialysis, about this dead community and my role in killing it. I'll testify, I said. No deal. I hung up and walked out to my deck one last time. Rainbow Lake reflected the sunset, orange and purple and gold, beautiful as a postcard. No fish rising to catch evening insects. No life at all. My fishing rod was still in the garage. I'd broken my favorite one, the one I'd used to catch that last bass, and thrown it in a ravine, but I still had others, could theoretically fish again somewhere else. Except I didn't want to. Every time I thought about fishing, I saw that morning, perfect weather, trophy bass, the phone call that started everything. I'd had a choice that morning, could have fought harder, could have gone public immediately, could have been willing to look crazy if it meant saving lives. Instead, I'd calculated my legal exposure and documented my warnings. I'd been a petroleum engineer, precise, methodical, covering the company's liability. I'd forgotten how to be a neighbor. My truck was packed. The moving company was coming Monday for the furniture. I'd bought a condo in Tucson near some consulting contacts who didn't know what had happened here, could start over, build a new life somewhere the water wasn't poisoned and nobody knew my name. I pulled out the bottle of water I'd kept in my truck console, sample from Rainbow Lake, taken the morning before treatment, the last clean water from this place. I'd kept it as evidence initially, proof of before and after, but now I wasn't sure why I still had it. Couldn't drink it, it was evidence. Couldn't throw it away, it felt wrong. Just carried it around like a relic from a past that had ended 6 weeks ago. The label was handwritten, Rainbow Lake last morning before. I unscrewed the cap and poured it on the ground, watched it sink into the earth, clean water returning to contaminated soil. Then I went inside, closed all the windows, and left Lakewood Heights for the last time. Some nights I'd wonder if I was the villain in this story. Most nights I knew I was. But tonight, driving away with the sunset in my rearview mirror, I just felt tired. Tired of being right. Tired of carrying the weight of choices I'd made and choices I hadn't. Tired of knowing I'd saved myself and 6 friends, while 41 families paid the price for my precision. The villain gets to leave. That's the thing nobody tells you. Cynthia would face trial, Derek would go to prison, Aquapure would pay millions. And Ray Calhoun would drive to Tucson, start consulting again, and live the rest of his life knowing exactly what he'd done and exactly what he hadn't. The last thing I saw in the mirror was Rainbow Lake, crystal clear and dead, reflecting the sky like it was something beautiful.